καθηγητά Έντουαρτς, κύριε Αντιπρίτανη, κύριε Πρόεδρε, αγαπητοί καθηγητές, αγαπητοί φιλοξενούμενοι, αγαπητοί φοιτητές, είναι ιδιαίτερη τιμή να υποδεχόμαστε σήμερα τον καθηγητή Έντουαρτς. Η επιστήμη όλο και μας καπνιάζει. Η πρόοδος στην βιολογία της αναπαραγωγής επί χιλιάδες χρόνια φαίνεται αστεία σε αυτά που έχουν επιτευχθεί τα τελευταία 40 χρόνια. Πριν από την επιτυχία της εξωματικής στον άνθρωπο, είχαμε επιτυχημένες προσπάθειες εξωματικής επιραματόζωα και οι προσπάθειες στον άνθρωπο άρχισαν να διεκδικούνται το 1944. Οι γνώσεις όμως της εποχής και οι δυνατότητες δεν επέτρεψαν την επιτυχία της μεθόδου. Η πρώτη επιτυχής εξωματική γονιμοποίηση έπρεπε να περιμένει πολύ καιρό για να επιτευχθεί από τους καθηγητές Έντουαρτ και Στέπτον. Ήταν η λεπαροσκόπηση, όπως ανέφερε και ο καθηγητής Μαρούλης, όπου έφερε κοντά τον Πάτερ Στέπτον και τον καθηγητή τον Έντουαρτ. Έτσι ξεκίνησε μία από τις πιο διάσημες συνεργασίες στην ιστορία της ιατρικής. Οι δυσκολίες που είχαν να ξεπεράσουν ήταν πάρα πολλές. Ηθικές αλλά και πρακτικές. Το Όλτχαμ, όπου ευρίσκεται η κλινική του Πάτερ Στέπτον, ήταν αρκετά μακριά. Πάνω από 200 χιλιόμετρα, είναι μια μικρή επαρχιακή πόλη πάνω από το Μάντσεστερ, και συχνά ο καθηγητής Έντουαρτς έπρεπε να ταξιδεύει πολλά χιλιόμετρα στη διάρκεια της νύχτας για να μπορεί να είναι κοντά στη λήψη των ουαρίων. Το 1969 ήταν αυτός μαζί με τον Στέπτον που αναφέρανε την πρώτη γονιμοποίηση μετά από εξωσωματική υποβοηθούμενη αναπαραγωγή. Δεν ήταν βέβαια θετική η κατάληξη. Το 1971 ήταν που επιχείρησαν την πρώτη τους εμβριομεταφορά. Όλες όμως οι προσπάθειες εμβριομεταφοράς ήταν αποτυχημένες. Το 1975, όπως ελέγχθηκε και από τον καθηγητή Μαρούλη, ήταν τα πρώτα αποτελέσματα που δυστυχώς ήταν μία εξομήτρια κοίηση και μία αποβολή. Έπρεπε να περιμένουμε μέχρι τα 3 λεπτά πριν τα μεσάνυχτα της 25 Ιουλίου του 1978, που γεννήθηκε η Λουίζα Μπράουν. Οι δημοσιογράφοι την ονόμασαν παιδί του αιώνα και ανακοινώθηκε η γέννησή της σαν ένα θαύμα. Και ήταν θαύμα. Αυτό που η Λουίζα Μπράουν, βλέπουμε εδώ μία φωτογραφία από την ανακοίνωση τύπου που ανακοινώθηκε η γέννηση της Λουίζας Μπράουν. Αυτό που η Λουίζα Μπράουν αντιπροσώπευε για όλο τον κόσμο ήταν η ενσάρκωση ότι η θεραπεία της στηρότητος επιτέλους μπορούσε να θεραπευτεί. Μέσα σε λίγα χρόνια η εξωματική γονιμοποίηση έκανε μεγάλα βήματα προόδου. Από τα χέρια των λίγων πήγε στους πολλούς. Και ο κάθε ερευνητής πρόσθεσε τις γνώσεις και την εφευρετικότητά του, και έτσι σήμερα η μέθοδος ξεπέρασε πλέον το ερευνητικό πεδίο και έχει μπει στην καθημερινή πράξη. Ο καθηγητής Έντουαρτς είναι ένας θαυματοποιός του αιώνα που πέρασε. Είναι ο πρωτοπόρος στην επιτυχία της τεχνικής που άνοιξε νέους ορίζοντες. Όπως είπε και ο καθηγητής Μαρούλης, γεννήθηκε το 1925, έκανε τη διδακτορική του διατριβή στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Εδιμβούργου, στη γενετική των ζώων, και θα έλεγε κανείς ότι από το ξεκίνημα της καριέρας του, το κύριο ενδιαφέρον του ήταν η δημιουργία ζωής, το πώς γίνεται η ζωή, πώς φτιάχνεται η ζωή σε ανθρώπους και σε πειραματόζωα. Το 1969 ανέλαβε τη διδασκαλία του μαθήματος της φυσιολογίας στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Κέιμμπριτζ, θέση την οποία κράτησε μέχρι το 1985. Από το 1985 έως και το 1989 ήταν καθηγητής ανθρώπινης αναπαραγωγής στο ίδιο πανεπιστήμιο. Από το 1989 είναι επισκέπτης καθηγητής στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Λονδίνου. Την περίοδο από το 1991 ως το 1994 διετέλεσε πρόεδρος της Επιτροπής Φυσιολογίας Αναπαραγωγής της Διεθνούς Ένωσης Επιστημών Φυσιολογίας. Από το 1969 ως το 1991 ήταν εκδότης του περιοδικού Research in Reproduction. Το 1986 ανέλαβε εκδότης του Human Reproduction και κατόρθωσε επί των ημερών του να γίνει το υπαριθμόν ένα περιοδικό αναπαραγωγή στον κόσμο. Το 1994 ήταν ο εκδότης του Human Reproduction Update και το 1995 ήταν ο εκδότης του Molecular Human Reproduction, θέσεις που κράτησε μέχρι και το 2000. Το 2000 ανέλαβε κύριος εκδότης του περιοδικού Reproduction Biomedicine Online. Θα διακόψω λίγο τη ροή για να σας δείξω τη γέννηση από τη ομάδα του καθηγητή Έντουαρτς του πρώτου παιδιού σωματικής γονιμοποίησης το 1982 από Έλληνες. Έτσι από Ελληνίδες που επισκέφτηκαν το κέντρο του. Ξεχωριστά θα πρέπει να αναφερθεί η σημαντική συμβολή του καθηγητή στην ίδρυση του European Society of Human Reproduction and Embryology, την παγκόσμια καθιέρωση, καθώς και στην ίδρυση και την ανάπτυξη των περιοδικών που σας ανέφερα, που είναι υπό τη σκέπη της ΕΣΔΕ. Σαν επιστήμονας, το κύριο ενδιαφέρον του είναι η κατανόηση της ανθρώπινης σύλληψης. Και ήταν το ενδιαφέρον του αυτό για τη συγκεκριμένη έρευνα που τον οδήγησε να ασχοληθεί με την εξωματική γονιμοποίηση. Ελάχιστοι άνθρωποι έχουν προσφέρει στην ιστορία της ιατρικής τόσα πολλά όσο ο καθηγητής Έντουαρτ στη γνώση μας για τη φυσιολογία της αναπαραγωγής και την πρόοδο της εξωματικής γονιμοποίησης. Η ζωντανή απόδειξη της Λουίζα Μπράουν είναι σίγουρα ένα γεγονός περηφάνειας για τον ίδιο και για τους συνεργάτες του, αλλά και ένα γεγονός ελπίδας για όλους εμάς που δουλεύουμε στον τομέα της υποβοηθούμενης αναπαραγωγής. Κύριε καθηγητά, σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για την παρουσία σας.
Ελληνική Δημοκρατία, Δημοκρίτιον Πανεπιστήμιον Θράκης, ψήφισμα του Τμήματος Ιατρικής, τύχη αγαθή.
Distinguished faculty, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and dear students. It is a wonderful day for me to come to Greece for this honorary occasion. It's wonderful. I wish to thank the people who have spoken, who nominated me, and have shown their joy, and I return that joy at being here. Could I say that it is wonderful to come to Greece, see a new young university, which is clearly going to move very fast. And coming all the way from Cambridge, which is an old university, well-trodden, well-developed, losing some of its ancient means, like having only men. We now have women, which is a great advance for Cambridge. So we are having our advances too. And could I say a special word today to the young students who are starting their careers? I think you will get a very good training, and you will enter a world which is a fantastic world of opportunity, of wonderful things that can be done, increasing by the day. At the pace of science especially, moves forward, ever increasing every year. So some of the techniques we use today are scarcely believable. They are so brilliant. Before I really start to talk about back to see you. And if I can ever help in a conference or debate, I will come back. Might I say too, that I am forever grateful to my family, and especially my wife, who have seen me disappear round the world to continent far and wide for 45 years now, leaving Heathrow 20 times and 25 times a year. That is travel. But the world is being educated. The world wants out here. If you go to China or Japan, it is the same stories, the same human needs. So IVF has had a most wonderful civilizing action across the world. We all share the same affinity. Besides my wife, could I thank my children, some of whom are now having their own mobile phones like we have here.
Yes, please.
But could I thank too my teachers? My primary teacher is Charles Darwin. I'm a humanist. My teacher is Charles Darwin. But the man who taught him to me was Professor Wellington in Edinburgh, the founder of epigenesis, who 40 years ago pointed out that evolution did not involve what we thought it involved. That's gene mutation and gene recombination. It's actually gene silencing and epigenesis and methylation of DNA, for those who are interested, that are involved in evolution. So when we grow human embryos in vitro, we are following an evolutionary pathway that we must recognize and respect. Our genes are there, they're open, and some of you youngsters, will one day interfere by putting the right genes in the right place and correcting deficiencies. Not yet. The world is not ready now. But Professor Wellington was wonderful. He taught me science and ethics, because he too was a humanist. And used to debate with the churchmen about science and religion. I used to go to listen to him. It was fantastic. And I would see each side defending their point of view. So really, when I left Edinburgh, I was highly trained in genetics, in reproduction, because my thesis was on mouse reproduction, and in ethics. And I would say that these three fields have stood me and let us get through a period of life which is astonishing to think about even now, to look back. Astonishing things happened. And since I've been chosen for this honorary degree, one of the highest awards any university can give, I want to describe how these fields developed, and then turn to the ethical implications. I think the most fruitful period I've had is in Glasgow, with a team of young scientists, where we started the first papers on stem cells. We knew in 1965 that stem cells would not stop dividing in vitro. They would divide through 200, 400 generations. We knew they would form blood, nerves, other tissues in vitro. We knew these stem cells were coming. And when I looked at blastocysts, I saw the inner cell mass of the embryonic tissues. I knew that human stem cells would come one day. We were working on rabbits. The ideas came. Look at humans. And at that time, we didn't have any idea of what human embryology was like. In fact, human reproduction was a matter for religion rather than science and medicine. And the unique training. I could not accept that. I could not accept. I had learned when I was working in Mill Hill in London at the Medical Research Institute that many couples were infertile. Not a few, 10% of couples were infertile. And the techniques I developed in mice and rabbits and rats and pigs and most species were the perfect ones to help them get pregnant. It was as if I'd followed a course of action previously ordained, but I think it was pure accident. So when I got to Cambridge, and I met what I think is one of the most wonderful things in science, and that is the young PhD student. Those Cambridge PhD students were fantastic. I think in the end I trained between 40 and 50 PhDs and MDs. I still know them all. I still love them all. And we still get together. Many of them are now famous professors in their own right. But we began, we took stem cells to launch this into total new fields of single cells, having enormous properties of colonization. It is coming home now. Now it is coming in this, even in last week in Nature, it is coming home. There will be a revolution in stem cells. One of my students, Peter Lawrence, found that stem cells injected in the tail vein of mice will colonize the heart, will colonize the liver, will colonize the bone marrow. They would not cause cancer. They would not cause damage. They simply went in and they tolerized their recipients. For the immunologist in the hall, they tolerized their recipients. Rat cells would mend mice. They would migrate to the sites of damage and mend them. We couldn't believe these results. They were incredible. Today, we know what happens with the brain, the heart, every tissue in the body. And the stem cells will migrate there and colonize and mend the tissues. There's a revolution in medicine coming. There's a problem at the moment due to epigenesis, which is started by Waddington, but that will be solved. That will be solved. There's even another paper in Nature Medicine which starts to solve it this week. So my students then, with them, we looked at chromosomal anomalies of the human embryo. With young Barry Ballister, our professor in southern United States, we fertilized the human egg one night. We worked very late at night, and as we went in to score the eggs that had been inseminated in the afternoon, we had to climb the railings because I'd forgotten my keys. And we didn't know our pressman was taking photographs. The next day in the papers it said, Professor Edwards is climbing the railings to do mischievous work in his laboratories. And when I said, no, I simply forgot my keys, John Baker could get in, the whole story collapsed. But that is what it was like. Wherever we were men with cameras behind, photographing everything. And my students. And we started pre-implantation disease of human embryos. Straightforward IVF, human IVF. Patrick Steptoe joined in. One of the most wonderful medical doctors I could have worked with. He had been lambasted for introducing laparoscopy. He was told he was a dangerous man, as I was being told I was a dangerous man. Because a surgeon should feel the tissues, but Patrick wanted to see the tissues. And he put his laparoscope in and became the world authority. And he started endoscopy. Endoscopy, which has emptied hospitals. Today, emptying hospitals everywhere. That is Patrick Steptoe's gift to us. And of course IVF, because together we took it on. And I wish to remember Jean Purdy, who helped us, technician nurse. She would help us both So there was a woman present in our group all the time. It wasn't only two men. There were two men and one woman. And I'm very glad for that. And so when we got these methods going, we started to train people. And now it is worldwide. I think now there's probably 2 million IVF babies worldwide. 2 million. There'll soon be 10 million. Because China has started. And Japan has started. And India has started. And the numbers of people there are incredible. If you take 5% of babies, well, the Indian population, Chinese population, the numbers are vast, beyond belief. But it's coming, because those countries are on the move. They're on the move. They'll catch us up before too long. And then we'll have a huge world, one world, maybe, hopefully. And carefully and ethically, I think they will. I want to see IVF approved. I want to see PGD, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, brought in, because that can clear communities of illnesses. In Cyprus, beta thalassemia being eradicated by doing PGD for that disease. I think there are 20 children born or something already, none of them afflicted by stunting the embryo. That is what I love. That is science at its best. I think the speakers tonight have been wonderfully generous to me. I've been delighted to see all you people and your wonderful responses. I shall go back to England tomorrow as a very happy man and a member of this university. What could be nicer? Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Vlad. I'm delighted to be going back to